At what point did you guys realize that we're on to something? This is good.
Congratulations, it's a hit.
You know what I love? Schitt's Creek.
What a thrill this is.
What a thrill this is for me, too.
Dan and Eugene Levy are joining me now. 5 solid seasons of Schitt's Creek.
It's a very surreal experience to go like 4 years where people barely know what your show is about.
Finally getting the attention and love and respect it deserves.
It's been insane.
The stories have been told, and it's been a fantastic 5 years. And we have the best season yet ahead.
Warmest wishes to that.
Kindest regards.
You broke hearts this week, like crushed, like I don't know if you felt the shift when you guys made the announcement that you were ending this.
I call you when I need you in my heart.
What is this? Oh, just a gift that once jolted me out of my little podunk routine. You just stand your solid ground, refusing to be anything but you.
Give me everything I need.
I think you're my best friend.
Give me a lifetime of promises and a
I love you.
world of dreams.
I'm in love with you.
Here he is, the love of my life, standing in front of me.
And it can't be wrong.
And this just felt like the perfect place to ask you to marry me. It's a yes. It's a yes.
You're simply the best.
And that town you passed through,
Better than all the
it's not called Shittsville.
better than
It's called Schitt's Creek.
And
it's where we live.
And I'm stuck on
As
your
lucky as I feel to have met David, I also feel incredibly lucky to be joining your family.
Tear us apart.
The truth is that I'm really gonna miss you.
Each time you leave me,
I'm gonna miss you as well.
walking away with my heart and my soul.
I met someone who changed my life, and I don't know where I'd be without him.
Better than all the
We
rest.
must cherish these moments before everything changes.
Anyone I've ever met, and I'm stuck
My
on your
family and I have been staying in a motel for the past 3 years. And I wouldn't trade our stay there for anything.
Oh, you're the best.
Hey everybody, we're joined today by Dan Levy, co-creator, producer, writer, actor of the groundbreaking comedy series Schitt's Creek, which recently set the record for the most Emmy awards in a single season for a comedy series. Dan, okay, for anyone who has been living under a rock, living under a pandemic, and for some reason has not seen Schitt's Creek, can you just give us a quick rundown of the 6 seasons? You can do it.
Oh, goodness. Okay, of course. Ultimately the show is about this family of 4 very wealthy human beings that lose their money and are forced to move to a small town where they are confronted with a very stark reality that they do not have a lot of the comforts that they had previously been able to afford. And ultimately it's a show about redemption and the realization that love can't be bought. And that ultimately these people, having found themselves in this small town, were inadvertently changed for the better. So it's a feel-good comedy. It's strange it's the 1-year anniversary of our last episode, actually. So it's a very bittersweet day.
Oh, is it really? Well, I'm sorry about that. And we're all sorry about that. I think everybody
happy to be here
agrees
talking
that
through it
you
with
ended too soon. But I'm glad the pandemic is ending, and that might help us get over the fact that, we can't be locked up anymore with Schitt's Creek, except for in the repeats, which are frequent in my house. So thank you for that. So the Rose family, we meet them at the beginning, and they are literally clawing for really the identity that they know, right? All of their wigs, for one thing, and all of their possessions. And so that's what's been, to me, to watch them kind of just the fierce anxiety and vulnerability that they feel in that moment. And then they're kind of dropped into this small town. And they really, honestly, for the entire show, never figure out how to assimilate into a small town life. And I'm just wondering, was that a kind of a fun situation to play around with? And what were some of those moments that you enjoyed the most?
Of course, I think that's where so much of the comedy came from, was this idea of playing around with watching these people struggle through very sort of everyday activities like, grocery shopping or, joining a choir, all of what seemed like very easy and comfortable things for most of us are incredibly difficult for them because they've always had people doing these things for them. So that really became kind of the comedic pulse of the whole series, was just constantly finding the ways of playing with this fish out of water concept, while at the same time making sure that over the 6 seasons we let some light in and we illuminated these people to the joys of living in a small town, and the fact that a lot of the culture that they thought they knew, having afforded themselves a very sort of cushy life with a lot of travel, didn't include a lot of the most basic elements of just like love and connectivity. So that really took all of their money getting stripped away for them to realize that there is so much more to life than just nice fancy clothes and cars and trips, and that interrelationships and the value that we place on those interrelationships and the support that we get through them is actually what is the biggest takeaway for them in an unexpected way.
Yeah, the fact that they were stuck in this, it's hard to call it a suite, but the 2 hotel rooms with the shared door, I guess, is probably as far as we could take it, that they were stuck in that situation.
Now with a lot of nostalgia.
I bet. Yeah, I don't know if, I've never been in a hotel with blue brick walls, but I'm imagining over time it would be something you really grew to love. And I'm sure you do miss it now.
It definitely grows on you, the aesthetic, for sure.
So one of my favorite characters, I think, and a lot of people loved Moira, and played by Catherine O'Hara. And I just was wondering, some of those favorite moments, she seemed to have just her sense of comedy. She seemed to have such a huge influence in my mind on the show itself. And I'm just wondering what that was like to work with her and how much influence did she have?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say influence so much as collaboration. I think our whole team was so collaborative. I think the key to great teamwork is to make sure that the doors are open for people's ideas. And as someone who was running the show, it was really important for me to realize that, when you have the talent of Catherine O'Hara on your cast, you have to leave space for her ideas. You have to leave room for the things that she wants to potentially change or rework, or lines that she wants to say that weren't exactly, as scripted. That's sort of where you get into the personalization of character. And we did that with every character on the show as well. There was always just a little bit of room left for all of the actors to add some input if they felt that's something that meant something to them. It allows for a kind of personalization. But in terms of Catherine, of course, she's just such a genius, and her impulses and her instincts were so sharp, and she knew that character so well. Anytime she came and suggested an idea, we really listened to it. And, 9 times out of 10, that idea made it on the show. So it was this great experience of collaboration, and knowing that we had a cast that was so strong and so capable that you could sort of, in the case of Annie Murphy, she wrote the song A Little Bit Alexis with some of her friends. So, I think in most situations that song would have been written for her, but it was really crucial to all of us to make sure that people took ownership over the work that they were doing as well. And she came back with a pretty impressive pop song. So it's
that's right.
It's key to make sure that people's voices can be heard.
It is kind of surprising that you guys haven't won a Grammy for that yet. Seems to be that, and your Tony seem to be the, couple of things that are missing.
We'll see what the stage play looks like in the next couple of years.
One of the things that you mentioned about Catherine, and I'm not obsessed with Catherine. I'm just saying, personally, the depth that she would go with her characters, I just felt like, man, she's really pushing the edge, and especially with the fashion. And I think out of all of them, she's the one, like, that woman is not letting go of her identity that she came into this town with 100%. And if she can influence the rest of the town, by God, she will, right?
As a character, she never actually said the town's name. ever in the
really?
6 seasons of our show. Yeah.
I'm filming television's Moira Rose. Won't you join me for a little stroll through the slice of paradise I like to call the town where I currently am?
So that was how crucial it was to both the character and to Catherine that she maintain who she is. And I think at the end of the day, we change as people, but there's always a through line of who we are. You don't change completely. And I think it was important in telling the story of these 4 characters that some of us change a little bit more than others. And in the case of Moira, I think she always felt like this was never going to be it for her. She never accepted that this was her reality. And that was totally fine because you got to offset that with characters that really did end up realizing that this town was a place that they could live and spend the rest of their life in, or at least the next, prolonged period of time. So getting to play with Catherine and with Moira's reluctance to ever assimilate into this town was obviously really fun. And to your point, fashion is such a wonderful way of making people stand out. And it does so in a way that doesn't require me to have to write a lot of expositional dialogue about how unhappy she is. When you see Moira walk into a cafe in head-to-toe couture and you're walking into a little local diner, like the jokes are written for you. And you also get to perpetually remind the audience that this is a woman that will absolutely never accept her circumstances.
True. Yeah. And there's a vulnerability in that too, which I think is one of those things that you never forget where she came from, how she's fallen into this town. And that for all the characters, really, that vulnerability that remains underneath it all is one of those things that I think connects you to the characters at their heart, as outlandish as they can be, and as maybe as hard as it may be for you personally to connect to their antics. I think that's one of the things that I appreciated most about the story overall.
That was certainly the intention, was to ultimately show some vulnerability. And I think that's why, we were fortunate enough to get 6 seasons, because that first season, you need to lay that groundwork for an audience to buy in to who these people were in order to slowly show who they're going to become and to rally, your viewers behind those people. It's a tough sell off the top. But it was important for us to spend that first season really showing who these people were. And that's where we got to buy a lot of the more sentimental moments down the line, when you got to see them really open themselves up and accept support and love from their friends and family members.
Do you think that because we were inside in this pandemic and all of this was available to us on Netflix, that we could consume and sort of journey along with these characters at a faster rate, that it kind of helped build an audience?
Yeah, I think there was a handful of things that really kind of bonded people to the show. And I think, to have our show sort of exist over the past 6 years, 4 years ago, or I guess close to 5 now, you had a real shift in the politics of America. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people felt really destabilized by that. And there was something so consistent about the messaging of our show, the messages of hope and acceptance and support, and a town that was all in it together, trying to be good. And I think when you have these major sort of cultural moments happen, be it, a very sort of potentially scary political situation, or you have, in this past year and a half, you have a virus that has forced us all inside. It can't hurt to, I certainly have with other shows found myself attached in a way that I probably wouldn't have been had the circumstances not been quite as intense. There's a desire, I think, because we don't get to see each other in person, all we're looking for is a point of connection. So I think to be putting a television show out into the world over these past 6 years that was hopefully very well intentioned and offered a safe place for viewers to come, whether it's once a week or whether you're binging it, and just come and hang out and feel safe. it only, I think, has exacerbated that feeling of connection and that feeling of closeness to these characters from a viewer's perspective, because, we're not able to go out and see our friends and go to dinners or travel. So all we have right now is TV. So it does kind of make sense, the fact that there's been this big uptick in the viewership of our show, and I think also in the way that people are watching it as well. I think when it started out, the feedback we'd get would sort of be we think the show is funny, and then somehow along the line, it shifted from we think the show is funny to we really need the show. I love the show so much. You people are like my family. And you really got this sense that we were all in this experience together, whether it was people watching our show or whether it was me watching other people's shows. TV has been this incredible sense of escapism, I think, or outlet for escapism for all of us.
You're absolutely right. I feel the same way. And I also think that maybe it was just because y'all are Canadian, and I think in general, Canadians are very comforting people. That's been my experience. That's been my experience with Canadians. They're very lovable people. So I appreciate that. And creating a show with all Canadians was a great move. That was really insightful of you. So
we have one American. Chris Elliott was our single American, and he made it known to us all the time. But we embraced him as one of our own, and I hope he left feeling like an honorary Canadian citizen.
What did the role of David allow you to do that maybe you wouldn't typically do as Dan? Because he's pretty out there.
Oh, gosh. He is. He is someone who is both incredibly insecure and also someone who overcompensates for that insecurity by being incredibly honest to a fault. And I think playing a character that is quite literally incapable of showing anything but the truth on his face, and speaking the truth at every turn, helped me a little bit, because I'm naturally someone who doesn't like confrontation. I try to be as accommodating as I possibly can, and in playing someone who really didn't stand for much BS and made his stance on things very clear, it made me, in a way, a kind of more confident and self-assured person. Not obviously to the faults that he has. I hope that I've found like a happy medium where people quite enjoy my company. But it was Annie Murphy, who plays Alexis on the show, has a very similar, story with Alexis, where we're both kind of quieter people in real life, and to get to play these incredibly emboldened, like confident human beings that really kind of walk through life thinking that they are the greatest things on earth. It can't help but make you walk a little bit more confidently in your everyday life. So I love David for that. I love him for showing me that maybe I can be a little bit more assertive and a little bit more clear when things are bothering me. But it was just such a thrill to get to play him, and also to get to tell his story and his love story, because we don't get to see a lot of those stories on television, and to have gotten an opportunity to tell that story without virtually any interference is such a rare thing, and one that I certainly didn't take for granted. So David has and will always hold a very special place in my heart.
Well, I do think that's one of the things that people really appreciate this show, and about you specifically, is your dedication to taking risks in order to follow a vision that doesn't necessarily follow a specific formula. Especially when you think about comedy, there is nothing like Schitt's Creek on TV anywhere else. And I think that takes a lot of courage from you specifically, and a willingness to be vulnerable that to me just shines through. I look at that show and I think there's only one person that could have made this, and it was Dan, because Dan found some place in himself that and was brave about putting it out there. And so I really appreciate the love that you put into the show.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I think at the end of the day, it really was this idea that I have one shot at this. And do I want to make something that I think people are going to want to watch? Or do I want to make something that I believe to be funny and meaningful, and that I can fall asleep at night knowing that I put out into the world something that was exactly my own? And obviously I created the show with my dad, and that sentiment extends to the work that we did together. But it really was this idea of like, let's just tell a story we want to tell. And if it doesn't work, at least we knew at the end of it all that we did everything we could. And there's never going to be any more sort of questions in our mind as to like, ooh, if we had done this or if we had done this, maybe things would have been different. So I think for me, that was like a huge philosophical realization to come to through this whole process, was like, I don't want to live my life with any regrets. So while this story was, and you know, telling the story of a comedy that also has a lot of heart and sentimentality to it, to your point, was not necessarily prevalent on television at the time, but it was something we really stood behind. And I would rather believe in the work that I'm doing than try to make something for someone else that really doesn't have the kind of personalized touch to it. And we were very lucky in the sense that that we got to tell these stories season after season, and that people eventually found it and really warmed to it. So hopefully I can continue to tell more.
Well, I think